3rd of October 2024 date all of us were eagerly waiting for. Last week हमने सारे 10 teams के produce कर दिए थे and boy could we not have expected two better encounters. Bangladesh versus Scotland was of course the tournament opener, and then it was the Asian derby between Pakistan and Sri Lanka. Two games that actually were a lot more closer than the scorecards might indicate. Two results that probably not a lot of people were expecting, but of course expect Jeet to get them right. Hello, Jeet bhai. Hello, Neha. How are you folks? And how has the World Cup started? Jeet, you can go first on this.
It was a bore fest, to be very honest. Yeah, both games were a bore fest. But having said that, had the games taken place in Bangladesh, it didn't guarantee any thrillers, right? So, a kind of a bore fest, but I think still a good start in terms of course, day one, the kind of results that we were looking forward to. So, good one, not bad. But I'm just hoping that this doesn't remain the theme going forward in terms of how the pitch behaves and all that stuff. But anyway, tomorrow it's a new venue altogether. So let's hope things will be different out there in Dubai.
And in terms of it being a bow fest, of course, sure, Neha, the scores weren't, relatively on the higher side and all of that. But even then, at the end of the day, what would you prefer? Seeing teams fight it out and it being a closely fought encounter, yeah, low scores. What, given a choice, of course.
I mean, this is definitely a tough one. I'd definitely like to see a mix of both. But just looking at the stories, from today, I mean, Bangladesh registering their first, T20 World Cup win from 2014. And you could see how much that win meant to them, right? Like Nigar Sultana Jyoti just collapsing to the full floor and, having that moment, playing her 100th T20. It just was a lot of emotions, amazing stuff to see. And I think going in as well, a lot of people had just written off Bangladesh ki are home conditions mein nahi khel rahe. They're going to actually find it really tough. But I think defending that 120 was quite remarkable in that sense. And I mean, just looking at the Pakistan-Sri Lanka match, no one gave Pakistan a chance to, actually win. Because we're playing against the, Asia Cup champions, right? Sri Lanka, who's been on such a rise, such great performances lately. And I think these two wins have really set the tone for the tournament. I know a lot of conventional, slam bang T20 lovers would have wanted some massive, like high run scoring fest type of matches. But I think it's encounters like this that really bring out, at least for me, the joy of the sport and what makes this game really special.
And truth be told, there's only so much of slam bang that you can expect on a Sharjah surface, especially one that had to face two games. So you can't really blame the players there. It's more down to the surface. And we've seen that before as well. When the 2021 World Cup happened, it was not necessarily dotted with boundaries. We remember it for, some of their low scoring encounters and whatnot. But anyways, talking about both the games, we thought okay, I thought logistics ka ek jagran dalo hata, but we will start off with the second game first, because since it's freshly etched in all of our minds, and then we'll work our way backwards to the Bangladesh-Scotland game. Of course, we will be talking about both of them in detail. But talking about the game that ended just about 10 minutes ago, Pakistan taking on Sri Lanka, a game that was a repeat of the Asia Cup semi-final, a game that all of them, at least a lot of them, thought was Sri Lanka start favourites. They should, in all likelihood, win the game. And then Pakistan won the toss, opted to bat first, and everyone was like, "Bhai, chal kya raha hai yahan pe?" I mean, you would imagine you would be a factor, so the team winning the toss would opt to bowl first. Wasn't necessarily the case. That Pakistan won the toss, and let's have the scorecard out in case you missed the game. Oops, I seem to have had the wrong graphic on. Apologies for that. There you go. 116 is what Pakistan were able to make. They were bundled out for 116 in their full quota of 20 overs. Their highest scorer being skipper Fatima Sana, who for some reason batted as low as number 6 today or number 7 today. I hope we do get to see her bat a bit earlier. Nidada, the experienced Nidada, of course, was the second highest run scorer, with a couple of cameos from Umima Sohail, and there was also a bit up top from Sidra Amin as well. With the ball in hand for Sri Lanka, it was Chamari, of course, like always. A 3-4 for her, a 3-4 for Sagandika, and a 3-4 for Prabodhini as well. A solid effort with the ball in hand by Sri Lanka, but unfortunately, it's their batters that really let them down. They were nowhere in place when it came to chasing the total. They started off on a very shaky note when Chamari got out to Fatima Sana in the first over of the game, and it was just downhill from there. No one really got going. Neelakshi Silva and Vishmi Gunaratne did get a start, and it seemed like, they could probably take the game to the end, but wasn't to be the case with the Pakistani spinners, especially. I wanted to say a quartet, but then there was Umima Sohail once again with the ball in hand, who sort of came out of syllabus for Sri Lanka. In terms of the performance there, Jeet bhai, let's start with you. The surface, of course, both teams that were defending the total, both teams that batted first, one ended up winning the game as well. But that effort from Sri Lanka in terms of their batting, that left a lot of room to desire.
Yeah, that's true. I think Pakistan's rationale was probably, divided between two things. One was, of course, that, they were making the use of pitch second, right? There was already a game that preceded Pakistan versus Sri Lanka. So it was a used pitch. And secondly, I was kind of trusting them to know these conditions really well because they had the experience, right, of having played. I know it was a long time ago, but they still know the conditions over here. They would know whether dew is going to be a factor or not. And I also heard a couple of insights from other teams, and they were like, there is no due whatsoever. I mean, the English players who are practicing over here, and there is no due at all, is what input I managed to get out of them. So it is probably a combination of both these factors that went behind Pakistan, opting to bat first, and it made complete sense, and it did turn out to be absolutely spot on as well. But of course, I mean, while Akshay was talking about Fatima Sana walking in number 7, there was Alia Riaz who walked in number 8 out of all the batters. That was quite surprising as well in terms of the chopping and changing of the batting order that they had. I know it remained kind of fairly consistent as far as the top 4 or top 5 is concerned. But then, of course, Tubasan coming in at, I think, number 6 kind of changed things a bit and pushed somebody like Fatima Sana down the order, Alia Riaz down the order. But, of course, a spectacular knock on Fatima Sana's part, coming in at 74 for 6 and taking a team to 116 was a commendable effort because there was not a lot of batters to fall, right? Alia Riaz came and went straight away, first ball. After that, Diana Begg is somebody who can hang around, but again, the way she was going about it was kind of weird because she was trying to be the aggressor when Fatima Sana was at the other end, and they just had like 3 wickets in the bag, so it was weird as far as that approach was concerned. But besides that, good performance. It was, of course, those 30 runs from Fatima Sana that end up being extremely vital for her side. They end up creating a huge impact or had huge influence on the eventual results. Fantastic on Pakistan's part, and I think they got most of the calls tactically correct, barring that batting order, which was kind of weird in my opinion.
Yeah, I mean, just talking about the batting order itself, Neha, given that in the South Africa series, we saw someone like another batting at number 4, there was Alia at number 5, and then there was Fatima Sana and the likes to follow. Here they had someone like an Umaima Sohail also now to squeeze in. So Sidra was always going to be at number 3, then they had Umaima Sohail, and then naturally everyone had to bat a spot lower. And they also further decided कि बहुत आज Tuba Hassan को हम एक promotion देते हैं. And you saw Alia Riaz batting as low as number 8. क्या लगा? Like, it seemed a bit too much chaotic, to be honest.
Yes, absolutely. I think Pakistan's batting effort and their batting order has been stuff of mystery, man. I mean, just looking at their bilateral series, batting combinations, even the Asia Cup and everything, they just experiment so much. And even as you rightly pointed out in the South Africa series as well, there's just so much happening that it's really tough to decipher like what is the approach. I think we'll also have to look into how there was a captaincy change, so there probably is a change in the philosophy of how they want to kind of go with their batting. But this is a World Cup match. We would have expected, maybe some semblance of it not being that chaotic. But I think, again, they were just taking their chances. Like Tuba Hassan coming in at 6 was something we did not see. You still had the likes of, Fatima Sana and Alia Riaz in your ranks. But probably that was also a measure to, arrest the collapse that was happening. They were already, reeling at a very precarious condition, and they needed, some runs and some batters still in the hut, because I think the way Sri Lanka was bowling was remarkable, right? I think Chamari Athapaththu just came in, got you those wickets. You could see there was a spring in her step, the way she was able to make the most of the conditions. I think she was just remarkable. And, given so much support from the other end by Sugandhika Kumari, who we've been talking about, so highly. I think even during our SWOT analysis, sessions as well, we were talking about how the kind of impact she has. So she came in, got a 3 for as well. And Udeshika Prabodhini as well. I think Nasir Hussain on comms was like, her speed has decreased. It's just a little more than, a spinner, but she did her job for a 39-year-old, getting you those 3 wickets. Irrespective of what those wickets are, she still did her job very diligently. So I think it was a case of, the bowlers of both the sides doing their job very diligently and actually, getting them the goods. But the batters clearly, not getting the memo and, being able to deliver.
Yeah, and to be honest, when it comes to Prabodhini as well, it's one thing to take wickets, and it's a completely different thing to take wickets of the two highest run scorers, top 2 highest run scorers of the opposition, 2 of their main batters, Fatima Sana and Neha. So clearly, I don't think Sri Lanka would be complaining. Like, they would have a million problems, and Udeshika Prabodhini's age in bowling is not one of them, for sure. But sticking to Sri Lanka now, in terms of the way they played, during our SWOT analysis, Jeet, we'd spoken about how they potentially could. No, I mean, they might not necessarily go for someone like an Achini Kulasuria. They might instead go for the spin of Sachin in the Sansala, which they did. And in turn, they also brought in, who was I going to refer to? I'm forgetting. Yeah, the Prabodhini was basically the only pacer. There was Sachini, there was Enoshi Priyadarshini, there was Kavisha Dilhari, and then Chamari herself bowled 4 overs. In fact, Kavisha ended up bowling just 2 overs there in the game. That spin attack really seems to be very well rounded in terms of what they offer. But the bowling in particular, we spoke of it in terms of how Kavisha was bowling, how Enoshi Priyadarshini in particular was bowling. That was very heartening to see.
Yeah, it was incredible. I mean, they were, of course, banking upon the undercutters and those arm balls, which were really turning out to be effective. But I just wish, I mean, there were more variations, because if you're going to bowl those arm balls to Umema Sohail, who really likes to lob the ball over the covers, she's going to maximize that. She's going to capitalize upon that. That's exactly what she did. But the variations that we've been talking about, I was just keeping a tab on the pace of all the spinners, and it was quite staggering to see. Kavisha Dilari's top speed was 89, her slowest was 67. Chamari's top was 88, slowest was 63. Sachin Nissan Sadar, top speed of 85, slowest of 65. So the pace variance was incredible. The quickest and the slowest delivery there was a huge gap between these two. So that was staggering to see, how frequently they were varying their pace, and they were, using it really well to their advantage. And it was actually managing to outfox most of the Pakistan batters. And it was, I think, a tremendous effort by the end of it. But like you mentioned, it was slightly surprising that, Kavisha Dinari, out of all the spinners, end up getting a quota of just 2 overs. But it was interesting in terms of strategy as well, because I do remember during the SWOT, us talking about Sri Lanka going ahead with 2 pacers, of course, Udeshika Prabodhini being one of them. But we thought maybe Achini Kulasuria might get the nod ahead of Ama Kanchana, but that is what they did. They just went very spin heavy with just 1 pacer, but that 1 pacer did work out really well, because, of course, I mean, finishing with a 3 for bowling, say around 98, 99 Ks was a phenomenal job. And that is where the experience counted. Of course, I mean, dismissing the ex-captain of Pakistan and the current captain of Pakistan, and like you mentioned, top 2 scorers on the day, was a phenomenal job done by Udeshika.
Yeah, not just the bowling, to be honest. Yeah, even the kind of field placements they came up with, they weren't really the most conventional of spots. Umema Sohail's dismissal comes to my mind. The way they had that fielder in place at square leg for the sweep shot, and boy, did she hit it straight to Hasini Pereira, if I'm not wrong, who was fielding that square leg, and she also gobbled it up. But again, one positive for Sri Lanka would be their bowling efforts, the way they bowled, because bundling out Pakistan for 116 is something they would be happy with. But that batting gap, once again, like, how do you sort of try and look at that? Because sure, there is a lot of dependence on Chamari and whatnot, yeah. But then you also had the likes of Vishmi, there was Kavisha, there was, of course, Harshita as well. You would expect more from such bankable batters.
Yeah, definitely. I think, again, just going back to our SWOT analysis sessions, I did talk about, the over dependence on Chamari Athapaththu. I think that was again kind of proven today, because the moment her wicket fell, you could see an entire change in the body language of the Pakistan outfit. They're like, let's go, we can actually get more wickets. And that's exactly what they did, right? They further got the wickets of Vishmi Gunaratne, Harshita Samara Vikram. And after it pretty much looked very fragile, right? Their batting effort, because I think Sri Lanka for long has depended on this trio, at least in the recent past. So in that sense, it was kind of a letdown, that this trio couldn't really, get going, and even the middle order couldn't kind of step up and deliver. Even the kind of shots that the middle order and the lower middle order were playing, I think the situation was, asking for like an 8 runs required per over sort of thing. But the kind of shots they were playing was just feeling really bizarre. And at that point, I think Pakistan had gained entirely, control of the situation. And there was no way that Sri Lanka could, kind of fight their way back in this match. I hope they actually have an assessment of that batting effort, because again, when you just look at Pakistan's batting as well, at one point they were in a very difficult situation, but it was that 9th wicket partnership that proved to eventually be the difference. So had Sri Lanka had those crucial partnerships, maybe things could have been really different. But I think just giving the benefit of doubt that they were still kind of settling into the conditions, just coming in from the warm-ups, although they have so much experience in these conditions. But I think Sri Lanka would want to do a serious evaluation of that batting effort.
Yeah, and just one point there, Jeet, in terms of how Sri Lanka batters, sort of plied their trade. There were just too many sweeps, too many reverse sweeps attempted, too many cross-batted shots. I don't know if they were trying to play the field or, like a lot of people say, the only time you see a batter attempting a sweep so desperately is when they don't know what's going to happen. When they can't read the ball, they'll be like, boss, chodo, sweep karte hai, jo hoga dekha jayega. And it seemed that way, especially the reverse sweeps, they just couldn't get enough of it.
Yeah, and it also comes a lot more naturally to you, right? As the subcontinent player, you are going to probably rely upon that. You're good with that as well, as far as the execution is concerned. So I think that is what they kind of relied upon and didn't really work out over here because field set was also really good. The kind of bowling and the lines that the Pakistan spinners were resorting to were really really accurate. So I think it didn't really work out. They really needed those big shots, going down the ground because you probably have mid off up in the circle, mid on up in the circle at times. So it was important to, go down the ground, make use of that, like we saw in the first game. So that is something we didn't really see. And, one of the stats, I was just going through scorecards. So none of the 11 batters for Sri Lanka managed to strike rate of 100. Everybody was less than 100. It is that bad. And, it's true, like the dependency upon Chamari has been very, very, evident for quite a long time. Of course, lately it has changed. But with Chamari also, sadly, the issue of late has been that even she has been struggling to perform. You look at how she performed in the 100. She was struggling to get going for a long time. Against Ireland also, she went there, bagged the first World Cup, came back to the 100, struggled again after that. And, she got off to a very, very similar start and a similar pattern in WCPL as well. It was only in the fag end, in those crunch or crucial games where she was able to register a 50. But those knocks were also slow. Although the situation demanded those kind of knocks, that's a different thing. But overall, if you look at the bigger picture, last, say, 4 months or 5 months, Chamari has been struggling for runs. And the runs that she's getting at times, when she's crossing say 20 runs or 25 runs, she's getting it really slowly. The strike rate is not that high. So she's been struggling for that. As far as other batters are concerned, like you mentioned, I mean, there is Vishmi Gunaratte, there is Hasini Pereira. But again, these guys are, like fairly slow starters as well. In particular, Vishmi Gunaratte. She's technically really good. She's very impressive, being so young. But when it comes to starts, she's one of the slowest batters going around in the last 2 years. So that is where I believe that dependency is going to continue upon Chamari when it comes to finding boundaries or being somebody who can, be the aggressor, take on bowlers because they don't have many options as far as that is concerned. So they need to, kind of go back to drawing board, chalk out new plans in terms of, maximizing the power play because we know how important it's going to be over here in this tournament if these two games are anything to go by. So quite a few things for them to look into.
Yeah, I mean, Chamari might not be in form, but we cannot surely say that about her opposition number. Fatima Sana, the Pakistan skipper, she was in banging form. The way she batted, especially the way she led the side from the front. We'd spoken about her during our sport analysis, during our preview as well. Ki boss, a player that we all are excited for, a bona fide superstar, and it didn't take her a lot of time to set the ball rolling in terms of how she performed. Sports fans are going out to say, hey guys, expected Sri Lanka to win the second match, but Fatima Sana ne akeli jitwa diya Pakistan ko. I mean, that's a fair way of putting it, especially with the kind of performance she put up with the bat there. Let's just have the graphic out, and that's, of course, the reason why she was the top performer of the day. 30 of 20 with the bat, and then also picked up 2 wickets with the ball in hand, including the very, very, very important wicket of Chamari Athapaththu. 3 fours and 1 6. In fact, the only 6 of the match, if I'm not wrong. That performance, Neha, we had spoken about Fatima Sana ki she's definitely one to watch out for. She is going to be very crucial to Pakistan's plans. और पहले मैच में आके दिखा दिया, why is she going to be so important for them?
Definitely. I think the way Fatima Sana performed was remarkable. She is that all-round package that I think Pakistan has long wanted. I mean, they've had, a lot of all-rounders, but I think consistency has been one of the biggest challenges. Touch wood, at age 23, I think Fatima Sana seems to be doing that job and is also leading her side very admirably. I think just look at the way she was marshalling her troops, getting the field placements right. She was taking a little input here and there from Nidadar, but more or less, she has a good head on her shoulders, was able to, deliver for the team when it was most needed. I think her knock sort of proved to be the difference between the two teams, and even coming in with the ball, just delivering from the get-go, she brought herself into bowling at the perfect times, when spinners ka quota ho chuka tha, and I think that was some very decisive thinking. So in that sense, I'm very impressed with Fatima Sana. Very excited to see where she goes from here, because this win no one really thought was coming. So Pakistan, yeah, can pull off those few wins and give all the others, in the group a run for their money.
Yeah, for sure. And speaking of Fatima Sana, of course, yours truly also got a chance to interview her. In case you've missed it, please do check it out in the link below, in the link mentioned in the chat. She speaks about a lot of things, including leading the side filled with elders, I mean, filled with seniors, importantly, who've got much more match experience. Sorry, not elders. I take that back. And also about her own role as a fast bowling all rounder, which is, to be honest, the rarity in this part of the world. So, definitely lots to look forward to. And Jeet Bhai, parting thoughts in terms of Pakistan, that batting lineup, you know what didn't work for them today. They still somehow managed to get over the line. But what are you expecting from them come the 6th of, what month is it? October, when they play India on Sunday, of course.
I don't see a lot of things changing here because had they lost, then it would have had repercussions on the batting order, on the playing 11. But since they haven't lost, I don't see even a lot of changes taking place. Maybe batting order here and there, but that's been consistent for the last few months, right? They change it irrespectively. So I think that same theme might continue. Top four might remain the same. It's only about two bars, right? It was only two bar getting promoted, which saw Alia and Fatima go one position down. Otherwise, there won't be many changes that I really anticipate, barring, of course, the forced change of Diana Beck, if it so happens that she's unfit for that game. Otherwise, I pretty much expect it to remain the same. But I just want them to tweak a few things because Omema came into the side having a reputation of being really good at number five. So I would rather stick with Omema at number five and get one of Nida or Alia batting at number four. I think that's where somebody of at least that caliber can provide an impetus because we know that Gul Feroza is struggling to give those starts. Sidra Amin, although she looked aggressive today, she had quite a better intent as far as today is concerned. She's still struggling, as far as the strike rate is concerned. So I would want one of Alia or Nida to bat number four and Umema to shift one position down with Fatima coming in at six and then Tuba at seven.
Fair enough. And also, sports fan going on to ask us, who do you think Pakistan will replace the injured Diana Beek with? It has to be. It has to be. My name for what could potentially be another X factor for
I think he's stuck. I think he wanted to say Tasmia Rubab potentially, so I'll just complete where he started. I think he means Tasmia Rubab, and that is pretty much the only pace option that they've got in the squad. So just somebody adding that left arm variety, and she just recently made her debut. So sorry, Akshay, what's your name? Tasmia Rubab.
Yeah, Tasmia Ruba was the name I was mentioning. I'm really sorry if I lost you guys there in between, or you guys lost me in between, to put it much more bluntly. But yeah, Tasmia Ruba is the only other pace option they have in their squad, given that you would imagine she would slot in. But the game is happening in Dubai and the game is happening in the afternoon. It's not an evening game. So for all you know, they might potentially go ahead with an extra spin option because it's the noon. You don't necessarily need another pacer. The surface would be a lot more drier. But again, thoda aur hame pata chalega when once tomorrow's games happen, because tomorrow will be the first time we'll be seeing a women's T20 happening in Dubai. उसके हिसाब से we'll also sort of accordingly get a better idea कि कौन खेल सकता है कौन नहीं खेल सकता and stuff like that. Anyways, that's that from game number 2 of day number 1. We yet to talk about the tournament opener. Akshay also meanwhile going on to say, boss, tomorrow's big game is of course India's opening game, which is against New Zealand. We will be talking about it in due course. Usse pehle, it was Bangladesh taking on Scotland in the tournament opener, and like Neha mentioned, it was their first ever win in over 10 years after a streak of 16 consecutive T20I losses in the World Cup. And that clearly meant a lot for Nigar, who herself was playing her 100th T20I. So clearly you could see the emotions play out the way it did. And also given that she missed that stumping opportunity of Sarah Bryce, if I'm not wrong, that was also somewhere playing at the back of her head, ki boss, matlab, meri wajah se kahin game na chhoot jaye and stuff. But of course, it was very heartening to see the way she celebrated, the way the team celebrated, importantly. And a couple of those blinders that taken by, if I'm not wrong, it was Fahima Khatun who took one of those blinders there near long gone. Fantastic catch that. Anyways, for the uninitiated first, let's have the scorecard out. Where are my manners? There you go. Where are my manners? This is the scorecard out. Bangladesh taking on Scotland. Won the toss, opted to bat first, just like Pakistan in game number 2. They got off actually not at the not at the fastest of starts, but the intent shown, especially by Shati Rani, that was definitely something very refreshing, given that we've always associated Bangladesh with slow starts, with slow strike rates. We spoke about this even during our, preview of the side, ki boss. One thing that's going to bite them and hit them hard is the fact that they don't have too many aggressive options. Shati Rani was slotted in to solve for that. I know 29 of 32 might not be the most fastest of starts, but clearly she showed a lot of intent. She was more than happy to step down the track, more than happy to give it her all, ball in, ball out. and hopefully that will come good for them sometime around. The highest run scorer was, of course, the dependable Shobna Mostri, who came in at number 3. Surprisingly, Migger herself came in at number 5. Or number 6 rather. It was Taj who came in at number 5. I was a bit surprising to see her bat so late. Then, of course, with the ball in hand, it was Saskia Hurley, the opener, who we thought was bat ke saath shayad kuch kar paegi. She picked up a 3 for herself. Catherine Rice, Olivia Bell were the other sort of contributors to the wicket tally. Scotland at return never really got going. Sarah Bryce saw the innings through. She opened, she carried her bat in some sense. She opened the innings for them and stayed on till the end. Her sister Catherine Bryce unfortunately could not really get going and was dismissed earlier. And once that Bryce sisters duo was taken care of, there was not really a lot of other batters that you had to take care of, and it made it a lot more easier for Bangladesh. In a side that's filled with spinners and that has Marufa Akhtar, no one would have thought Ritu Moni would be the pick of the bowlers and would be the player of the match in game number 1. We will, of course, talk about her much later. But Neha, let's start with you in terms of Bangladesh's batting. That power play, the way they showed intent, that's definitely something they'll be very happy with.
Absolutely, because I think you could see how the conditions were playing, right? It was getting a little difficult to bat. Nonetheless, I think, at one point they must have felt that, oh, maybe 119 is less. But I think it's those knocks, right? Especially the one by Shati Rani. She got that 29, a very stable knock. And even when later when we had Shobna Mostri, come in with her knock of 36, I think these were kind of the defining pillars, so to say, of that batting effort. Because again, just looking at the other batters who kind of got their starts but couldn't get going, that became a concern. But again, I think another trend that we can probably talk about is losing wickets in clumps, right? They were again in a situation of bother. Nigar Sultana was trying her best, I mean, she's not your a conventional, slam bang type of batter, but wickets just, falling around her again brought this question in, like, did she just slot herself in later in that batting? Should she have come in earlier? Could, Bangladesh have gotten a bigger total? But eventually, I think that 119 did prove, to actually be a defendable total. And I think even in the interaction that happened before the second innings started, I think Sobna spoke about how, that total is definitely defendable. They have a lot of confidence in their bowlers, and yeah, the bowlers pretty much did the job. So a lot to be proud of, nonetheless.
Yeah, that effort from Bangladesh. Jeet, thoughts on that effort, because you specifically spoken about Shati Rani, and that's a name that you would also be looking forward to in the top order, because they would be in dire need for quick starts. Again, run rate wise, not the quickest, but overall they would be happy with the intent shown for sure.
Intent went up a notch, that is for sure, because like you mentioned, 29 or 30 doesn't really tell. So that's probably a strike rate of 90 or 91. But that doesn't tell you the number of attacking shots that she played in that knock. And you could see that, right from ball one, she was trying to whack it. Although some of them, of course, didn't, came off and they were clofted and all that stuff. But that intent was important, because that is where, Bangladesh have been lacking that sort of a player in the top orders. That was really, really important. But having said that, of course, Shobana Mustari also, I think the management was really clear that they are picking her for that number 3 role because of the lack of options that they've got in the domestic circuit. So we kind of knew that it's bound to happen that she's going to bat number 3, and she played a vital knock as well, 36, and even she showed a lot better intent than I have seen previously. So I think that was a crucial knock. But coming to Nigar Sultan, I think I wouldn't really blame the entry point, because by the time Bangladesh lost the second wicket, 12 overs had gone by. Now, that is something that doesn't happen so often, right? They are 2 down very early, and that is when Nigar generally walks in. So it could be the 6th over, 10th over, or the 8th over. But here we are talking about 12 overs going by. So I know even then it was Taj Neha who walked in, but she was gone first ball. So again, it didn't really make that big a difference. Maybe 5 or 6 balls is, what that partnership lasted, after which Nigar came in. So it didn't have a significant impact. It's just that, sadly, what has happened is that because Taj Nihar had 2 good knocks in the warm-up game, it has potentially influenced her selection. Otherwise, I don't think that selection might have taken place and somebody else should have got a knock. That's, again, my opinion. And that is vital. But again, she was gone first ball run out, so it didn't really matter. But overall, a pretty good innings, I would say, given the pitch and the situation or the conditions that were on offer. Managing 35 in the power play. That was the highest for the day for any team, 35 runs in the power play, which is what Bangladesh managed. So it was less than run the ball, but still the most amongst all the 4 teams. So I think it was a good effort, a decent effort from them, given the kind of resources that they've got. And Yeah, even I think Fahima Khatun down the order, that's the reason, why I wanted her addition as well, because she has the potential of playing such cameos, finding those boundaries, and even her knock end up being really impactful. It was a quick cameo, but it was very, very, very handy. But besides that, Scotland, I think we kind of knew, right? They are going to go spin heavy, as they're known. Catherine Bryce, Rachel Slater, they have the new ball value. Besides that, of course, they are going to rely upon spin. The only surprise will be coming in the form of Priyana Chatterjee not bowling, but again, she also
Exactly.
predominantly is a new ball bowler. But it was still an option that, a pace option that Scotland potentially could have gone for. But they didn't, which is fine because they've got tremendous spin attacks. They didn't need the services of Priyana Chatterjee. It was only at the back end where I think Saskia Orley came as a bit of surprise because she does bowl regularly, but I've not seen her so frequently, coming in the 18th over and bowling the 20th over as well. But I think she did her job fairly well as well. So good performance. I think the only kind of, I would say, grey area that remains across the entire day, I would say, across both the games, is that catching. Catching has been, quite bad, to be honest, because I think a total of 13 catches went down across two games. We're just talking about two games and first day, 13 catches at Sharjah. And we've been talking about, people dropping catches at Dubai. This is Sharjah with 13 catches have been put down. So that's quite a high number for a sample size just two games. So that is still
Team
an
India has
area
come
for,
into that record.
so that is still an area, for all these teams to kind of work upon. But I still feel Bangladesh were really good with the ground fielding. I think they were phenomenal as far as that is concerned. But I think we'll talk about it a lot more when, of course, we discuss second innings.
Yeah, and to be honest, sticking to Scotland as well, their bowling effort is something they will also be happy with. Given that this is the first time in a World Cup, this was the first ever World Cup fixture there, Neha. There was a lot of control shown. None of them really, conceded a lot of runs. There was no weak link in the attack that Bangladesh could very easily target. And that was something they would be happy with. Everyone conceded, below 7 runs per over. Everyone were there in and about 5, 6. And the accuracy shown. Like, I remember we were talking about extras also. That something could be a bit of a concern in terms of how they bowl. But all in all, a very, very solid, competent bowling effort from a side that definitely cannot be just labeled as another associate nation.
Yeah, definitely. I think just talking about the extras they just conceded like three extras, which is remarkable, right? And even the control shown by the entire bowling attack, I think none of the bowlers went above 7, which is a very good sign. And at no point it looked like, they just let the match get away from their hands. I think Saskia Hurley, we have to talk about her bowling effort, getting those three crucial wickets, just giving 13 runs. I think she was spectacular with the ball. And and I think she had ample support from the other end. You had Catherine Bryce, as usual, delivering. She's what your associate player of the year, no, of the decade, actually. For such a long period of time, she's held that accolade. It really showed through, right? That experience. She's played in England regional cricket as well. So I think she was also, remarkable with the ball. And I think Jeet would be very happy that Olivia Bell also, got a chance to feature in the playing 11 today. I think she was brilliant, very economical. And I think the Bangladeshi batters were finding it, tough to kind of pick her. And even Aptaha Maqsood, right? We've seen so much of her in the 100. And so many players talk highly of her, even analysts for that matter. Although, her wicket tally doesn't read a lot today. But I think she was very economical and, was able to control the run flow. So in that sense, I think Scotland's bowling effort is definitely something very noteworthy, a silver lining for them to, take going ahead. And I think they can challenge, the best of the best teams if things really go their way. And today was a very good start.
Yeah, and speaking
And I
more of it,
think,
of course, before that, just one thing. Guys,
yeah,
please make sure you're hitting the like button if you haven't already. I see that there's so many of you watching. Not too many channels are going to be covering the Women's World Cup as comprehensively as we are. And that's definitely a claim we're more than happy to stake our hats on. Just please make sure you're hitting the like button if you haven't already, because it would do a world of good to us. And also, please make sure you subscribe to us if you haven't already. And Jeet Bhai, of course, continuing with Scotland.
yeah. So even with Saskia Orley, I mean, those last two overs, those three wickets were actually pretty good. But I think those 13 runs, I think, ended up being that difference because there were quite a few boundary balls that were involved in those two overs, which I would say ended up being quite costly. I know three wickets, or eventually the figures don't kind of show it, but I think those boundary balls did have a bit of a negative influence or negative impact by the end of the game. But in terms of discipline, I think both teams were stellar. Bangladesh and Scotland, they were fantastic. Of course, I understand that there was a lot of spin that was bold, so you would expect them to be, a lot more disciplined. But the pacers that were on show. I mean, all the four of them were fantastic in terms of how they bowled and the discipline that they showed in, of course, very, very tough conditions. But from Scotland's perspective, I would have actually preferred them to even try out Darcy Carter in the middle overs. She is another player who bowls off spin, and she's very handy. And of course, being I think the tallest player on the side, I think barring Chloe Abel potentially, it's a different variety, right? When it's a high arm release, somebody is quicker through the air, so and somebody who bowls
Short
regularly
distance.
as well. So I think yeah, so it could have a different ploy that they could have potentially used because Apta bowled really well. Sadly, she didn't get a wicket, but I think that is where potentially a couple of overs could have been squeezed out of Darcy Carter in that middle phase. So it's something that they could potentially look into going ahead.
Yeah, I mean, the bowling effort is something they would be happy with. But now talking about the batting as well, Jeet, once again, I'm happy that in a sense, a lot of things that we spoke about during each of these teams' previews have come good, have sort of held through. So happy to sort of look at that, research actually काम में आता है. देखो guys, तो इसीलिए research करो, जब भी कुछ करते हो, कुछ बोलते हो. But sticking to Scotland's batting, we've spoken about how it's not the bowling, it's the batting in particular that would be under the scanner because the batters haven't played, such top level cricket consistently enough to be able to, face all these bowlers, especially spinners. We spoke about how their numbers against spin don't necessarily pack a punch. And even today we knew there is going to be dependence on Sara. But the way Catherine got out, the way Saskia Holly herself got out, like, again, you would want to believe last 2 overs went for 15 runs. अगर एक भी बैटर टिक जाता और वो last over जो 15 रन कंसीड होते उसके उसके बदले अगर 10 ही रन कंसीड हुए होते, do you think that could potentially have been the difference between the two sides?
With Sasuke, I do agree. It was kind of a wicket thrower, but she was trying to be aggressive and she got out. So I wouldn't really, hold her to any sort of blame. But with Catherine, I think it was quite unfortunate because, of course, Marufa Akhtar, and she got the ball to skid and it stayed really low. And at her pace, it's kind of difficult, on a pitch like this where it suddenly stays low, it skids low. So it was slightly unfortunate for Catherine Bryce to be dismissed like that. But besides that, we know that, they are majorly reliant upon that top order. There is Catherine, there is Sarah, and there is Saskia. They have to deliver and they have to contribute for the most percentage of runs if Scotland are to win or are to chase down any sort of a target that is in front of them. So with Sarah, I just thought that it's always a tough ask in these kind of conditions when you have kept the wickets for 20 overs, then you come out again, then you start the run chase as an opener and you bat out 20 overs. So you've basically been out of 40 overs, right from ball one to the last ball that you face. You've been out there in tough conditions. So it's always going to be challenging, and that is where I feel that Scotland can kind of tweak things a bit. They could have Sarah Bryce going back to number 4, where her record has been the best amongst any Scottish batter. And that's a role that she's been playing for some of the other teams as well. If you remember, Welsh, I think that is where she bats, right? It's that middle order role that she's got, and she's done fantastically over there. So she can potentially go back to that number position since she knows how to kind of get going and adjust the pace of the game or the situation. And that is where they could have Ailsa Lister opening because Ailsa at the end of the day is an opener. That is where she started from the under 19 level as well, and she's really aggressive as well. So that also will allow Sarah to get a bit of break, right? After being on the field for 20 overs as wicket keeper, or if they are even batting first and then coming back on the field to defend it. That break is really important in these tough conditions. So if that is a kind of change that they can make, I think it's going to prove, according to me, a lot more fruitful. I know they've tried out Darcy Carter as well, who's another opener, but it hasn't panned out well at this level. So I would just want that strong 3 players to be kind of separated a bit rather than having them in top 3, because once they are gone, it's always going to be a catching game for Scotland. That's exactly what happened today, barring Sarah, of course, but she was exhausted. That was very, very evident.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, again, they would be, taking in that experience, playing in this heat, playing in this oppressive heat, importantly, is not something that's going to be easy. And unfortunately for them, the schedule is not in their favor. They're going to be playing 3 afternoon games. And this was just the first of 3 such afternoon games. They're also going to be playing against South Africa and England in the noon. I'm not sure. मतलब ICC यार थोड़ा तो रैम दिखा देते यार. इतना तुम सोचते हो ये सब करते हो, but again you can't really blame them as well. That's how sort of the cookie crumbles. You can't sort of have everything that way. But let's see how Scotland do. They would be happy with the bowling efforts. Now it's all about the batting also to pull their socks up and do something for them. Talaiva in charge meanwhile asking us, should I join your channel? Of course, bhai, subscribe kar do if you haven't already. Baki, if you want to join, we would love to know what you exactly mean by that. We will also take this comment. We'll answer it a bit later. Thoughts on the change in conditions from Bangladesh to UAE, and it potentially also becoming hard for teams like Scotland to pull through. They've got two more day games to go, of course. Unavoidable, but tough on them too. Thanks for that. We will take this up. But before that, of course, one last bit of formality from this game. We have to talk about the top performer of the day. We've spoken about how, when it comes to Bangladesh, it will be the spinners, it could be Nagar Sultan, it could be Marufa Akhtar. Hi, Sam, no one really saw Ritu Moni backing the player of the match. And again, we're not complaining about it. We are all here to see new names coming up, to see, importantly, more players showing and putting their hands up. And Ritu Moni, of course, was the top performer of the day. She also ended up backing the player of the match in game number 1. Neha, thoughts on that bowling effort? Yeah, no boundaries conceded, 4 overs, 15 runs, 2 wickets. A solid effort.
Definitely. I think she was again, the backbone of that very formidable bowling performance by Bangladesh. I mean, just look at the wicket she got, right? One was that of Ailsa Lister. It was that, slower ball on a, and I think that was really a lovely dismissal that she was able to effect. And even Darcy Carter's wicket that she got, again, it was that back of a length sort of a delivery. And I think the way she was just able to mix and match her line and length and bowling so economically well was really great. And I think she would be very proud of this performance because we, saw how the pitch was really favoring the spinners, but still coming in with her pace and really doing the job well. I think was remarkable. Was complimenting Marufa Akhtar also really well, from the other end. So all in all, I think she would be very proud of this performance and excited to see how she goes, in the rest of the World Cup.
Yeah, and Jeet, before you talk about her bowling, I'll have to say that Darcy Carter के लिए मेरे को बुरा तो बहुत लगा है. Because when she hit the shot, even she thought यार मैंने तो छक्का मार दिया. She seemed, ये तो छक्का है, मुझे भी वही लगा. She seemed to have connected. She seemed to have gotten decent contact on it. Unfortunately, Fatima Khatun with the blinder that long gone. But even then, taking nothing away from Ritu Moni and that bowling effort there, something Bangladesh would importantly be very happy with.
Yeah, she has been that workhorse in the middle phase because she has been consistent with that. But when we talk about Catherine Bryce, she's very similar, right? Not a high pace, an average speed of 90 is what she managed. And Ritu Moni was not far off. She had an average speed of 89. So she also generally operates in that same pace range. And again, she's very, very witty when it comes to using her cutters, kind of varying her pace in that, say, 85 to 98, 99 mark. And she's good with that. But really what stood out, of course, is the fact that she's accurate with that. She doesn't drift it down leg. If she's going to bowl an off cut, it's not misguided, right? It's not going to go down leg side or anything that's wide outside the off stump. So she's a smart operator and she can be very handy. A role that's, say, for example, very, very similar to what Heather Graham plays for her side, whichever side that she plays for, right? That medium pacer, who has got those cutters in the middle phase and be really impactful over there. So it's a very similar role that Ritu Moni also plays for Bangladesh. And she, of course, had a fantastic day and that was good for Bangladesh. Of course, she can chip in with a bat as well, but maybe some other day for her.
Yeah, I mean, that's that from day 1 and both the games, of course. It was 2 fascinating games. Day 3, day 4, match 3, match 4 on day 2, of course, will be even more fascinating and we will be previewing them right now as well. But before that, of course, let's just take this comment. Jeet, I know we've spoken about this during the previews as well. The change in conditions could potentially have helped a few sides. Where do you think Scotland stands on that spectrum? Has it helped them? Has it not helped them?
Probably a bit of both because had this taken place in Bangladesh, of course, the spinners would have been a lot more effective. And it's a team, like I mentioned, that relies upon their spinners. And they've got quality spinners, out and out quality spinners. There is probably not a single name that I could look at and say that, here's an average spinner on the Scottish side. There is none, literally. So I think that is where they would have been benefited. But from a batting perspective, we, of course, talked about their bad record against spin. So that is where they would have been challenged a lot more. Over here, it was not as prevalent, right? The ball is stopping a bit. The pitch was on the slower side, but the ball is not ripping anywhere. And of course, the fact that they have played here in the qualifiers, they have got a lot more experience of playing other T20 cricket as well at in the UAE. So I think they are quite used to all these conditions. So they would still be better off playing over here. It still gives them a lot higher chance of putting in better performances or being in the shot of actually pulling out a win or two. But I think Bangladesh would have been a lot more tougher. And funnily enough, I was just checking the forecast in Bangladesh. Apparently, there is rain that's forecast for the entire week. So I think it might as well have been a blessing in disguise that the venue is shifted to the UAE because I know it's the other extreme where it's scorching heat and a lot of humidity, testing conditions at the other extremes, but at least the games are happening and going ahead, and I think that is what's really important out of this.
Yeah, 100%, 100% agree with you there. But what's even more important is, guys, nearly 100 of you watching on Twitter. Yeah, thoda YouTube pe aa jao. Please make sure you hit the like button if you haven't already. And please, please, please subscribe to us if you haven't already. Like we said earlier, we will be comprehensively covering each of the games that are going to be happening this World Cup till the 20th of October when India lifts the trophy, of course. But speaking of previewing tomorrow's games, we've got two games coming up. Let's have the graphic out. I understand that Neha has not to impress with my reverse jinxing, so to say. But let's hope, yeah, let's hope. Fingers crossed. Let's hope that happens. But yeah, talking about what's up ahead for us tomorrow, it's South Africa taking on West Indies. And then, of course, later that same night, it's India taking on New Zealand. Both these games are happening in Dubai. Gents and ladies, Neha, let's start with you on this. South Africa versus West Indies, a noon game, Dubai. Never really hosted a women's T20 before. What are you looking forward to and what do you expect tomorrow?
I think it's definitely going to be an exciting encounter. I think whenever we think of South Africa, the first thought, at least for me, that comes in mind is, they were finalists in the last edition. They have a point to prove. And somewhere, we've seen over the past year as well, they have gone through some sort of a transformation as well. You have Laura Wolfart, who's leading the side. You have a lot of young players, experienced players. They have the pedigree to go all the way. It's just about getting that combination right. And even looking at West Indies, I think this is one team that even, in our previews we discussed as the dark horse, a team that has the potential to kind of, upset teams and actually, end up going all the way, led by Hayley Matthews. I think both the teams, at least on paper, look really formidable. We are definitely in for an exciting match. Both of them have a point to prove, because a lot of fans and analysts have kind of written them off. And I mean, some have even considered them as, that potential fourth team that could possibly make it. And luckily, they find themselves in Group B and not in Group A. So I think both of them will definitely fancy their chances and, just get off on the right note, right? Getting that win is of utmost importance. And that's why I think, this match is definitely going to be a very exciting one and happening in Dubai, a place, where we haven't historically seen any women's cricket matches is definitely a start, yeah.
Yeah, and sticking to South Africa, there, Jeet, in the two warm-up games, Marizan Cup did not really play a part. Even in the Pakistan series, to be honest, she only played in the first T20 and she was rested in the next two. How do you look at the side shaping up, and do you think there are any potential niggles, or they were just sort of wrapping her up in cotton wool to ensure कि boss जब World Cup आएगा तब हम लोग आराम से अपना ब्रह्मास्त्र निकालेंगे बस?
No, it must be to manage her workload as we discussed earlier. So I wouldn't be surprised if she is straight away in the playing 11. You can't leave her out, right? And I don't think there are any other injury concerns from what I have heard. There is no chatter about that in the South African camp. I think Nonkuleko Malaba had a few issues, but she did play the last warm up, so she's probably up and ready as well for this encounter. But besides that, I think it's again going to be a battle for both these teams. Put it up with the heat that's going to be there. So I think that's where it's pretty important. If you win the toss and why you should be batting first, at least in the day games, because when you bat first, you're putting the opposition, the 11 players of the opposition, out there on the field in scorching heat, and it starts taking a toll on you. You're extremely exhausted. You could potentially be dehydrated if you're not taking enough fluids, and then you come out to bat after fielding for 20 overs. So it's a huge challenge altogether. But why I feel Dubai is going to be a lot more challenging is because of the venue. Sharjah, I believe it's an open ground, right? It allows the breeze to kind of go through, and it's an open ground, no grandstands, nothing to really worry about. So breeze has an impact. But Dubai is a closed stadium with massive, stands, and it's a closed roof stadium as well. So there won't be as much breeze that would be, blowing. So it's going to be a different challenge. It's going to be like a hot zone. Everything is going to stay within that particular stadium. So it's going to be a different challenge altogether. So again, I won't be surprised if the team win the toss, opts to bat first again, put a score on the board, defend it. That's probably going to be the team, unless if the pitch is completely different. But still, I think it's very, very unlikely. But South Africa, of course, if you look at the head-to-head, they don't have a good record against the West Indies. And West Indies would again, kind of be fancying themselves. Of course, Deanna Doughton is back. She also, by the way, just like Marzan Cup, she also didn't take a massive participation in these warm-up games, including the unofficial warm-up games that they had against Scotland. She didn't play a part in those games. She didn't play a part in the first official warm-up game, and the second warm-up game, she just came out there for one ball. She was out, and that's it. So even potentially there could be some injury concerns with her as well. We don't know about that, but she's going to be back as well. So the West Indian lineup is bolstered significantly. So it's going to be interesting as far as who comes out ahead. But again, my money would be on the West Indies, and not only that, of course, but it's a crucial encounter, right? In terms of deciding who might potentially take up that second spot, assuming England will be one of the front runners to qualify out of this particular group. So I think that is where this pretty much would or potentially be a knockout game between these two sides.
Yeah, it's interesting. You would have hoped for this fixture to happen sometime later so that we would be in a much better situation to understand, acha, to agar ye jeete to ye ho sakta hai, wo ho sakta hai. Now it's still too early to talk about permutations, combinations, calculators. Itni jaldi nahi nikalna padta hai. Speaking from experience, of course, as an RCB fan. But Neha, talking about the South Africa West Indies fixture itself, and in terms of how it's going to be a hot cauldron, like Jeet said, we'd also spoken about during our team previews, when it comes to spinners and spin bowling, South Africa has one of the worst spin attacks. Their spinners haven't been amongst the wickets. They've been conceding runs far too often than they would like. But now, given that they will be against West Indies, which is, again, a very competent side of spin, sure, this isn't Sharjah, but you would still expect spinners to have a much bigger say than pacers. Afternoon game, how would you look at something like that for West Indies?
Yeah, I think West Indies definitely plays the spin really well. That has been one of their USP for some time. So I think South Africa will really have to up their game. I think we've seen them bowl not that well, and I think the spinners will really have to step up and kind of make the most of all the things. I think we'll also have to be a little kind on both the teams because they're not used to playing in conditions like this. Nonetheless, I think we can expect a good encounter because I think even we'll have to look into the fact that the West Indies will be playing here for the first time, right? So what if South Africa actually does end up getting on top of them? The spinners actually come into play and make the most of it. So definitely an interesting encounter on cards, but let's see who comes out on top.
All right, and then of course thoughts on the playing 11. Jeet, let's start with you on South Africa itself. How do you see the spin attack shaping up? Do you see Malaba being fit? And if that's the case, who else do you think will be a part of that spin attack? There's so many options they have.
No, I think Malaba should be back and should be in the playing 11. And I think besides that, they don't have any options. So I think Seshni Naidu might sit out. I don't think they'll offer that variety as yet because, of course, she's inexperienced and the little international experience that she got didn't really pan out well for starters. And I don't think they would be willing to throw her into the ring so early. So they would generally stick to the experience of Malaba. And then, of course, they're going to have support from Chloe Tryon. There'll be Sunil Lees will be chipping in with her off spin. So besides that, it should be predictable. But I am still keen to see if one of the things that I had mentioned comes out to be true or not in terms of just one out of Aneka Bosch or Aneri Dirksen making it to the playing 11. I personally still think Aneka Bosch might sit out, but
in particular,
yeah. I'm still thinking Bosch might miss out.
Blasphemy.
But it should be interesting to see what kind of combination they go ahead with. But you're talking about the spin record that they have. So in the last 2 years, South Africa is the only team amongst all the participating teams whose pacers and the spinners average in excess of 28. So both of them have struggled. And if there won't be considerable movement with the ball on offer for the pacers, then Marizan Cup might turn out to be a little bit ineffective. So that's where even she'll have to start resorting to other kind of variations. So it's going to be really, really testing, and it's not going to be easy either over here for the Pacers in the kind of heat that they'll be facing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. And Neha, how do you look at this? So do you see Olive, Aibonga Kaka, Tumi Sekukune and Aneri Dirksen being a part of the setup? So that's going to be 3 plus Marizan Cup, 4 pace options, and then the 3 spinners that Jeet mentioned? Or do you see Tumi Sekukune missing out in just Aibonga Kaka, Marizan Cup and Aneri Dirksen to chip in if needed? Like, how are you looking at the pace attack in particular shaping up?
I think I'd go with option 1 because having those 4 paces with the spinners coming in might be the option that they would want to kind of explore, right? Because I think Marizan Cup in the power play, we've seen the kind of magic she can do. I know conditions are very different, but we can still probably expect her to kind of deliver as well. And even non-Kululeko Laba, I think I just murdered the pronunciation, but apologies for that. I think she too. Yeah, I think she too will, come in handy probably after the power play, can get you those crucial wickets as well. And somewhere I think, yeah, we would see a lot of pacers coming in because historically, South Africa has had their struggles with spinners. But even talking about Seshni Naidu, I think so many people have just talked her up so much. Yeah, the next big thing from South Africa. If not, at least in this game, I think going ahead, she might get a few games, depending on how South Africa performs. They've won a few games. They are in a position where they can kind of experiment. I know with just four group stage games there isn't a lot of room for experimentation, but I think she's definitely one to watch out for, a leggy coming from the stable of South Africa. So, a kind of variant that they've wanted for a really long period of time. I hope at some point in the World Cup we kind of do get to see her, but at least from what I see, they will kind of opt for those four pacers and then have the three spinners, yeah, in their combination.
I think we have forgotten Nadine de Klerk, so she's definitely going to be in the playing 11. So to me,
Pacer.
Seko Pune is going to miss out. So it's going to be basically Marzan Kaap, Nadine de Klerk, Aneri Dirksen, and Ayabonga Kaka. Those should be the four options, four pace options in particular.
Agreed. Makes sense. Anyways, that's that from match number 3 tomorrow, which starts at 3:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, of course, and the game's coming live from the Dubai International Cricket Stadium and not Sharjah. So it'll be interesting how that pans out. And right after that, at 7:30 p.m. Indian Standard Time, of course, it's Team India that begin their World Cup tourney, and they start against the Kiwis down under. It's India versus New Zealand. A very exciting encounter on the cards, to be honest. Neha, let's start with you. क्या लग रहा है, क्या expectations है यार इंडिया से?
Yeah, so I think this is a very tough one because expectations are, of course, really high because, hey, I mean, it's India, right? Playing against New Zealand, a team that has, kind of struggled in the recent past. Although they have the right set of players, they just seem to, be getting a lot of things not right. But again, just looking at India, it really depends on the kind of combination they're going for. I read somewhere that, Harmanpreet Kaur is being looked at that number 3 option. So what does it again mean for the combination, right? Will we be going in with that extra spinner? Do we have, Jemmy coming in at 4? Do we have Yastika coming in at 5? It's just so many questions at this point. I think we definitely not, discounting any of these players and the kind of capabilities they have. But I think just getting that combination right and getting the first win is going to be so important for India. It will, I think, set the tone for the rest of their campaign as well, right? Because agar you don't win against New Zealand, I think a lot of teams would be like, maybe India can be, just taken for a ride. And even coming from that Asia Cup loss is something that would be weighing on them because everyone thought, we're in our 9th final. This is definitely a win. But it was kind of a very humbling experience. I think, for the lack of a better word, I'm going to use humbling for India to, kind of not win that Asia Cup. So they are coming in with a significant gap as well, right? So I think for me, the expectations are that, I hope India goes all the way, goes for the win. But I think just a lot depends on the kind of combination they're going for. And choosing the World Cup to experiment with your number 3 was not ideal, but I think, yeah, the situation just calls for it.
Yeah, fair enough. And Jeet, of course, before we sort of get to India to you, we will talk about New Zealand. In terms of that spin attack in particular, if South Africa were the worst spinner, have the worst spin attack in terms of, taking wickets, New Zealand are the worst when it comes to conceding runs. They have the highest economy for all spin attacks amongst the participating teams in the 24 World Cup. Given that, how do you see this shaping up against India, who love to play spin? And New Zealand, again, if you've forgotten, in the recent past, they lost to Sri Lanka in a bilateral series for the first ever time. They lost to Pakistan in a bilateral series for the first ever time. So clearly, this is a team on the down low. How do they pick themselves up against a relatively high-flying India?
Yeah, at least a good part for New Zealand is that, most of the spinners are in top form. So when you talk about Eden Carson, when you talk especially about Millie Kerr, because she has found her groovings again, which is really important. She's bowling her googlies again. I was just watching a few clips of the wickets that she got in the 2 warm games. They were spectacular deliveries and the kind of googlies that she bowled. There was one Yorker as well that she slipped in. So she's in form. She's in red hot form, which is, I think, extremely vital for New Zealand going ahead in this entire tournament. Of course, Eden Carson is another one who's been in form as well. It's just, of course, the call between whether they want to go for the experienced Lee Kasparek or they want to go for Frank Jones. Like during the SWOT, I did mention that my preference would be Lee Kasparek, but then, of course, it's down to New Zealand up to, as to what they want to do and whether they want to have the added variety over the experience of Lee Kasparek, then I think Fran might play. But otherwise, I think, like I mentioned, the good part is that, most of the spinners are at least in good form. So that's where it's going to be good. It's just that, if they are bowling second, then that is where I think their challenge lies, because ball's going to be wet. At Dubai, the ball is going to be wet in the second innings. You won't see conditions that you saw today. So I think most of the people are they have made the conclusions, right? After just these two games that, hey, you were talking about dew. Where's that dew? There is no dew whatsoever. But the fact is that at Sharjah, dew has not been so prevalent in nature. But at Dubai, it has been. So at least I personally believe that, tomorrow in the second game, there will be dew. So today, of course, in both games, we saw the captain winning toss, opting to bat first. Tomorrow, I expect the day game to have a similar trend where the captain winning toss might opt to bat first. But it's game number 4 where I might see that trend kind of get broken, where team that wins the toss might actually opt to bowl first and would prefer to chase. Because I do expect that due factor, and that team might be challenged a bit.
But Neha, again, sure, New Zealand spin attack is something that seems to be at least in some semblance of form, so they would be happy with it. But their batters themselves have struggled against spin. Yeah, they're the worst batting lineup against spin. They've not really matched up well against it. And then you've got an Indian side that's already got 4 spin options, and if needed, they can go for the 5th one. So clearly, then they have no dearth for spin options. How do you see that matchup playing out? Do you see India sort of going for a spin choke against New Zealand come tomorrow?
Yeah, definitely. I think that is likely, a possible combination that India would want to experiment with. I mean, just look at our spinners, right? You have the likes of Deepti Sharma, you have Radha Yadav, Shriyanka Patil, Asha Shobna, who can definitely, chip in with the ball and challenge the New Zealand batters. But just looking at New Zealand's batting as well, like in the past few series, I think they're again just very dependent on the likes of Susie Bates, your Sophie Devine, and Amelia Kerr to just step up and deliver. I think New Zealand has also tried the approach of kind of separating the trio across that batting order. So एक ही shot में अगर सारे wickets गिर गए तो it shouldn't lead to a dependence on the lower middle order. Yet something just doesn't seem to be clicking. Even looking at Susie Bates and Sophie Devine playing their ninth T20 World Cup, I mean, they just come in with like a wealth of experience, right? So I think they do definitely have their strategies of, tackling spin. And Sophie Devine too. I know she did not have the best of the WPL seasons, but has understood, I think, over like so many years as to how to counter spin. So I wouldn't be too surprised if India does, slip in a spin heavy sort of a bowling attack to actually challenge the New Zealand batters. But how New Zealand actually comes on top will be, I think the biggest talking point if that happens.
Yeah, I mean, speaking of big talking points, though, Jeet, none bigger than India's number 3 conundrum and who's going to come in there. Should Harmanpreet come in, then there is going to be a vacancy. So many options to choose from. There's Yastika Bhatia who could slot in at number 5. There's Sajna who could slot in at number 7 as an additional finisher. There's someone like an Asha they can go for as an additional spin option. Itne sare choices hai. How do you see this panning out tomorrow?
It's very hard to guess when it comes to India's playing 11. It's always going to be a challenge. So if the trend in the warm-up games is anything to go by, then they are potentially looking at Harman at number 3. Not something that I necessarily agree with, because she also consumes a few dot balls to get going, and her record number 5 has been tremendous. So if Harman is tasked to enter a situation where she has to attack, I don't think we have a better batter than Harman alongside Richa Ghosh. These two are capable of finding the boundaries at will. So I personally wouldn't have preferred that, but if that is what they are going to go ahead with, then it does open up a slot like you mentioned. Now that is where either they can go for the left-hand option of Yastika, who does not have those high gears, or they go for Sachna, who has the high gears but has not delivered yet. So it's taking a call between which one you want to go for. I would personally prefer Sachna, of course, because you've seen the potential that she has got ahead of Yastika, who's not used to batting at say number 5, or entering a situation where she has to start at gear 4, gear 5. She doesn't have those gears, by the way, to begin with. So it's going to be a huge challenge. So it's about what India really want, how they are looking at this kind of situation. Of course, third option being add an extra bowler, which again I'm not in favor of. I think we've got decent bowling attack of 5 frontline bowlers that we've got, and of course the additional options. And I think we've got so many additional options. There is Harman who can chip in, there is Shafali who can chip in, Jemima who can chip in, and of course Shruti Mandana as well. So at least in the second warm-up, we did see Shafali roll her arm over. We saw Harmanpreet rolling her arm over, and both did get a wicket as well. So we've got decent bowling options, so I don't see why we need that extra bowling option. It's just between this call of Yastika or Sachna. If Harman is to bat number three, I'd personally go for Sachna.
All right, and Neha, final thoughts. How do you see that panning out? How do you see them plugging that hole? If Harman bats at number three, who comes in then?
Yeah, this is a really tough one. Something I was thinking a lot about, but I actually, now that Jeet puts it, probably Sajna could be an option that India could possibly explore, because I think she can chip in with the ball, can do a little bit with the bat as well. We've seen enough in the WPL, especially that one match where she did kind of step up. So I wouldn't be too surprised if they kind of slot her in. But again, this experimentation happening at the World Cup, not sure if it's the ideal move, but here we are. We find ourselves in this conundrum. And I think this number three has been discussed so much across all panels and all shows that I hope, we find some answers tomorrow with, Harmanpreet just kind of taking that onus and, stepping up at number three. So let's see how things kind of pan out. But at least from the looks of it, Sajna could be, possibly that finisher type of option after Richa Ghosh, who can also chip in with the ball and kind of, I think, just balances that playing 11. Yeah.
Fair enough. Whether we find answers or not, we will be here tomorrow at 11 p.m. Indian Standard Time sharp, discussing them, talking about a lot of things, and hopefully an India win as well to begin with. Until then, it's a goodbye from all of us. Thank you so much for tuning in on the first preview show of day one, of course, where we discuss both the matches that happened today. We preview tomorrow's games. There's lots to talk about tomorrow as well. Make sure you tune in at the same time. Until then, it's a goodbye. Take care. Good night.